By day, Charlie Westbrook was just an ordinary man, but by night, he was the charismatic voice of Midnight Macabre, an eerie late-night storytelling radio show. Despite his captivating voice and compelling tales, the show had been struggling to gain a steady audience over the years. The pressure from executives and producers were mounting for Charlie to boost his numbers or face the grim possibility of his show being replaced. With Halloween approaching, Charlie knew he needed a brilliant idea to save Midnight Macabre. After much brainstorming, inspiration struck. He would invite his listeners to call in and share their true, unexplained encounters and eerie life events. This interactive element, he hoped, would engage his audience and draw in new listeners intrigued by the promise of real-life horror stories. Determined to make this Halloween special a success, Charlie eagerly announced the new format on air.
This Halloween, Midnight Macabre is bringing you something truly chilling.
He began, his voice echoing through the night.
We want to hear your stories. Those encounters you can't explain. Those moments that sent shivers down your spine. Call in and share your tales, and let's make this Halloween unforgettable.
As the night of the first special approached, Charlie could feel the excitement and anticipation building. He hoped this new approach would be the lifeline Midnight Macabre needed to thrive.
Hello, listeners, and thank you for tuning into Midnight Macabre. We have a special show for you tonight. What makes tonight's show so special, you ask? The answer is simple. You. If you haven't heard, I want you to call the show at 555-215-0134 and tell us about something that's happened to you that you cannot quite explain. The lines are open, so feel free to pick up the phone and, I'm being told we have our first caller. Hello, can you tell us your name and where you're calling from?
My name is Valerie, and I'm calling from Texas.
Hey Valerie, thanks for tuning in and calling into the show. So, tell us, what's something that's happened to you that you just can't explain?
Well, many years ago, when I was a child, about 10 years old, something strange happened. Well, I would go to sleep at night and wake up, but not in the usual way. I'd wake up looking at myself sleeping. It was like I was out of my body, floating above my bed, and it was incredibly real. My parents told me I was just dreaming, but it happened too often to ignore. At first, I thought it was just a peculiar dream, but the more it happened, the more unsettling it became. Although I was in my room, it felt as though something dark was watching me. There was a heavy, ominous presence that filled the room, and I felt his eyes on me, even though I couldn't see it. And these dreams, or whatever they was, happened frequently when I was younger. One night, curiosity got the better of me and I decided to leave my bedroom to explore. I floated down the hall and everything seemed normal at first, but then I saw them. Dark figures lurking in the shadows. They moved slowly at first, but as soon as I noticed them, they began to chase me. I was terrified. I tried to escape, but they was relentless. I rushed back into my room, and as soon as I re-entered, I just felt like I was safe again, like the dark figures couldn't follow me. I floated back to my sleeping body and sat next to it, crying in fear, just crying. I would sit there, sobbing until I finally woke up, screaming and drenched in sweat. I've had so many of these experiences and they've haunted me for years. Every time it happened, I was terrified to go back to sleep, afraid of what I might encounter. Even now, as an adult, the memory of those nights still sends chills down my spine.
Thank you, Valerie, for sharing such a haunting experience. Stories like yours remind us of how mysterious and unexplored our minds can be. With that, our lines are open again. You can reach the show at 555-215-0134.
And just like that, they had another caller on the line.
Hello, please give us your name and where you're calling from.
Charlie asks the caller, but hears only heavy and raspy breathing. He waits patiently for a response, listening intently to the breathing of the caller.
Hello, you're on the air. Got a story for us?
A few seconds later, we hear a voice. It's deep, deeper than that of your typical male voice, and it sounds eerily scratchy.
Hello, Charlie. You're in danger. The dark is coming for you.
Charlie laughs.
You're funny. I've been doing this show for 5 years now. You don't think I've ever been prank called before?
The caller ignores him.
Can I pray for you, Charlie? I can give you protection against that which may cause you harm.
Sure. Why not?
Heavenly Father, we seek your grace in this hour. Guide your servants with the strength from the shadows. May the light of your wisdom pierce through the veils of the night. And may the whispers of ancient knowledge find their way to him. In the embrace of the eternal, where darkness dwells, bestow upon him the gift of insight beyond mortal ken. Let the tides of the unseen world follow through him, and may the ancient echoes of the void bless his path. In the name of the infinite light, we pray.
After the prayer, the caller bursts into laughter and suddenly hangs up. Charlie is left speechless, trying to comprehend what had just occurred. Seconds later, he's brought back to reality, realizing that he was still on the air.
Sorry about that. We're going to take a quick break, then we'll be right back with more stories from you.
Charlie takes off the headphones and leaves the studio. Waiting outside the studio is his producer.
Jay, did you hear all that?
Yeah, I did. And guess what? The listeners are pouring in. Your numbers are doubling. This was a great idea. Keep this up, and hell, you might end up getting a better time slot for your show.
Thanks, Jay, but about that last caller, did something not strike you as being a little off about them?
Oh, don't tell me they got to you already. It's Halloween. People are going to call in with a few prank calls every now and then. And must I remind you that listeners love a little drama?
Okay. So that's all you think it was, a prank call. It felt, I don't know, like something dark, evil, not like a prayer at all.
Oh, brother, you're overthinking it. I need you to go back into the studio and do your show. We're going to be big. Big, Charlie, I tell you, big.
Okay. Jeez.
Charlie returns to his setup and continues with his show.
Hello, listeners, and welcome back to Midnight Macabre. We're getting word that many new listeners are tuning in. I wanted to personally give you all a warm welcome and implore you to reach out to all your friends on your social media networks and share the show. We would really appreciate your support. With that, we have our next caller on the line. Please tell us your name and where you're calling from.
Hello, my name is Nissa Jane, and I'm from many places.
Hello, Nissa. Thank you for calling into the show. We'd love to hear your story.
I have many stories, from many moons, and through many years. Are you sure you would like to hear one?
Sure, that's what we brought you on the show to do.
Her name was Allison Carr, a park ranger in Carlsbad Caverns in New Mexico. I was on one of her guided tours, along with plenty of families and curious kids. One of those kids was a little too curious for their own good, according to the authorities anyway. The parents were distraught. One moment, the girl was holding her mother's hand, and the next, she was gone. The mother swore it was like she vanished into thin air. Allison heard the girl's voice echoing from a forbidden part of the cavern, a place no one was supposed to go. She went in to investigate and came back, but not with the girl. No, forensic scientists later confirm what she returned with. It was the girl's skin, fully intact and human.
Nisa chuckled darkly in the background. Charlie stood silently for a moment, almost forgetting that he had a show to run. Jay opens the studio doors and usher him to continue.
Don't freeze up on me. Keep her talking. The listeners are eating this up.
Charlie clears his voice and continues.
Right. Did the authorities ever find out what happened?
No, not the authorities, but the locals had a hunch, but they were quickly labeled crazy.
No, really? And what was their hunch?
Again, it got silent for a moment.
Skinwalkers.
With that, Nisa hung up, leaving Charlie spooked.
Right. Thank you, listeners, for tuning in to Midnight Macabre. We hope you enjoyed tonight's show and look forward to your continued support in the future. I've been your host, Charlie Westbrook. Good night and happy Halloween.
Charlie had always felt strange about the final caller, but his producer Jay couldn't be happier and urged him to have more listeners call in with their strange stories, specifically Skinwalker stories. In a little less than a year, Charlie had amassed a cult following. With over 1 million monthly listeners tuning into his show, Charlie was now a popular radio show personality. His show was simple, and that's what drew listeners in. His show was now allowing him to live a lavish lifestyle he always dreamed of. The most beautiful and exotic women, expensive parties, luxurious homes, fancy cars, and everything else far in between. He used it all to drown out the voices in the back of his head that truly believed some of the Skinwalker stories that were being told. One crisp autumn morning, Charlie was on one of his routine jogs when he noticed something strange. A raven following him throughout his jog. The raven was close enough for Charlie to catch a glimpse of its eyes, which were particularly frightening. They didn't look like that of a typical raven's, but instead they looked human, as though a person had taken the form of a raven and was watching him. That wasn't all what had occurred that morning. Charlie was about a block or two away from his home when an unkindness of ravens swarmed Charlie, scratching, screeching, and clawing at him. Charlie screamed as he made his way into the safety of his home, but not before hearing a voice.
You should be very afraid.
The voice said, and as Charlie closed the door, he caught a glimpse of who the voice belonged to. A large dark raven, looking sinisterly at him with the eyes of a human.
This can't be real. This isn't happening.
Charlie immediately grabs his phone and makes a call.
Come on, pick up. Pick up.
Hey, Charlie, my man. What can I do for you? You ready for tonight's show?
Jay, I think we need to call the show off.
Whoa, Charlie. Are you crazy? Sorry. Do you know how much money we're making? The show is a hit. Why in God's green earth would you want to stop?
I don't know, Jay. I just have this feeling.
Jesus. A feeling? A feeling, Charlie? What feeling, Charlie?
Well, you're going to think I'm crazy, but the Skinwalker stories, I think they're real, and they may be after me and you if we don't stop.
And would you like to elaborate on what the hell makes you say that? Did you get a threat? Did some crazy fan come up to you today? What happened, Charlie?
Charlie thinks for a moment but decides not to tell Jay about the talking raven.
Nothing happened. Nothing. I just think we should stop with the Skinwalker stories. I've had this feeling since we aired the first story. This very strange feeling.
Jay sighs.
Okay, Charlie, calm down. Fine. Here's what we'll do. We'll take a little break from the Skinwalker stories. I can see that they're getting to you. And we'll just see what the numbers say.
Thank you. I really...
Jay hangs up.
Of course.
As the day went by, Charlie moved on from Skinwalker stories to creepy encounters and other genres of horror stories. He had hoped things would calm down and that there wouldn't be any more strange incidents, but that's not what happened. One afternoon, as he was getting ready to head out for his show, he found dead animals on the hood of his car. One evening, he found writings in blood that were written on the doors of his office. They spelled, "Too late." The final straw was a call he received during a show.
Good evening. I hope you all had a wonderful day. We've got some great stories for you tonight. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. With that, let's hear it from our first caller, Kenya, calling from New Mexico. Kenya, you're on.
Charlie, you're in danger. They're coming for you.
Typically, Charlie is told to ignore calls like these and move on to other callers, but this time, he keeps the caller on.
Who's coming for me? Who's coming for me?
You know who they are. I'm afraid it's too late for you.
Charlie is struck with fear. It's written all over his face, but that fear slowly transforms into anger.
It's you, isn't it? The dead animals, the blood on the walls. I don't know how you did your little trick with the crows, but I know it's you. What? You think your prank calls scare me? Guess what? Starting tomorrow, Skinwalker stories are back on. You don't scare me.
Charlie disconnects the caller and takes a moment to catch himself.
Listeners, I'm sorry you had to listen to that little outburst. We'll be right back.
Charlie puts on commercials and walks out of the studio to see an elated Jay grinning ear to ear.
That's what the hell I'm talking about, Charlie. Don't let these guys get in your head. Way to stick it to them. I can see those ratings climbing up already. At this rate, we'll be the top radio station in the nation. Keep up the great work, Charlie.
The ratings on Charlie's show began to rise. His audience grew, and despite his outburst on air, his likability seemed to increase.
Be a man. Don't hide in the shadows and face me. That's what's wrong with you keyboard warriors these days. When push comes to shove, you're too much of a coward to put your money where your mouth is. To the coward who's constantly following me around, trying to scare me, get a life.
On air, Charlie wore a mask that he was not afraid, but he was more afraid than ever. Media outlets labeled him as unhinged. He began losing more sleep and lived in almost a perpetual state of anxiety and fear. One night, after a particularly late broadcast, Charlie decides to walk home through a nearby park. The air was cold and the path was deserted. The silence was finally broken by the crunch of leaves. He turns around instantly, and to his horrific surprise, that's when he saw it. A figure standing motionless in the shadows.
Who's there?
Charlie called out, his voice trembling. The figure didn't respond but began to move closer. The figure had a limp, wheezing with every breath, and held some rope in its hands. As it stepped into the dim light, Charlie's blood ran cold. It was his producer, Jay. But there was something terribly wrong with him. His eyes were vacant, his skin pale and waxy. Behind him, the shadows seemed to ripple and pulse with an unnatural life. Suddenly, Jay spoke, but it wasn't his voice. It was a low, guttural growl that echoed in Charlie's mind.
Are you still not afraid, Charlie? I can feel it all over you. Your fear, it feeds me, and I am famished. I've waited so long, and now you are ripe for the taking.
Charlie turned to run, but other figures leapt from the shadows, wrapping around his legs like dark tentacle-like vines. He fell, struggling to free himself, but the creatures tightened their grip. As Jay approached, Charlie saw his form begin to change. His body elongated, and his face twisted into a grotesque mask of rage and pain. He wasn't human anymore. He was something else, something ancient and malevolent.
Skinwalker.
Charlie utters the word in disbelief. Jay reached out, his fingers now long, bony claws. He used the rope to hogtie Charlie as he begged for forgiveness and mercy. Jay simply laughed, and what sounded like a crowd of creatures laughed with him.
Welcome to your Midnight Macabre, Charlie.
Charlie screamed, but the sounds were swallowed by the night. The last thing that he saw, before everything went black, was the monstrous grinning face of Jay, and the encroaching darkness that seemed to consume the world around him. The next morning, the scene of Charlie's disappearance was serene and quiet. The only sign that something terrible had happened was an abandoned phone, coincidentally connected to his radio show's live feed. As the morning sun rose, the radio played the final words of its fallen star, distorted and eerie.
And that's it for tonight's episode of Midnight Macabre. Happy Halloween.
And with that, Charlie Westbrook, the once charismatic voice of Midnight Macabre, vanished, just like the people and the stories listeners told. The show continued, of course. New hosts and producers came and went, each one captivated by the dark allure of Midnight Macabre. But the rumors persisted. Whispers of Charlie's fate, of strange happenings behind the scenes, and of a curse that haunted anyone who took up his microphone. Listeners kept tuning in, and somewhere in the shadows, Charlie listened.